I'm thinking about global citizenship. Global citizenship is, where do we fit in the world? How do we take a part in all the things that are happening around us? We're here today, but we are a part of something much bigger than us. Can I pull this out so I can walk around?
Yeah. I think you can walk around with your mic. No?
Is that okay?
You can walk around with your mic.
Is that okay? All right. Okay. So when I first started teaching, and I know that looks like it was probably, I don't know, a few years ago. But when I first started teaching, believe it or not, almost 15 years ago, I used to stand at the door to my classroom every day, and I felt like I was asking the kids to come into my room. Every morning I would welcome them. That's a really nice practice to start every day. And in fact, I still do that. I stand at my classroom door every morning and I invite my children in. But instead of feeling like I'm asking them to enter my classroom, I ask them to take a shift in perspective. Sometimes instead of looking into the classroom, I think about how we can look out at the world. So instead of us being inside, looking into each other, coming into a classroom, how can we share that broader perspective on the world? All right, so now I know you're all thinking, Lisa, I hear you, I hear the pedagogy, I hear all the reasoning behind it, but you don't know my community of learners. You don't know the challenges I face, you don't know the reality of my everyday, and you don't know the limits of my resources. You're right, I don't. But what I do know is my community of learners. And I know the challenges I face every day. And I know the limits of my resources. And one of the things that I face every day is the same things that you do. I have internet connectivity issues. I have a computer with the letter D missing, which is fantastic because we can't write run-on sentences because we can't write the word and. Okay, we're working on that. So let me tell you about my community of learners. I'm currently teaching a grade 4-5 class, which started off as a grade 3-4. And 3 weeks into the school, we reorganized. I went from a lovely class of 20 children to an even lovelier class of 30 children, of whom I have everything on the spectrum, every type of they are beautifully diverse and different in their abilities and their needs, and every type of learning style you can possibly imagine, all combined into my amazing grade 4-5 class. And I don't say that sarcastically. I absolutely adore them. I miss them today, and I pray for my supply teacher. But I do adore them. So I have this multifaceted group of learners. And in the school I teach, we have computers on wheels, computer carts. Anybody have labs, computer labs, laptops in your schools? Okay, so in my school, on the second floor, we have one computer cart. And in that computer cart, on a good day, are 13 computers. Don't ask me why. 13 is an odd number. I think it started as 15 and one got put in a teacher's workroom and one is probably out for repairs, and hopefully the D will come back one day. So we have 13 computers, and our literacy block, our school timetable is broken down into 3 blocks of 100 minutes. So we have 100 minutes, then recess, 100 minutes, then lunch, and 100 minutes, and then we send them home. My literacy block is during the second 100 minutes. So during my literacy block, I have signed out those laptops, those 13 laptops, for about 60 minutes of my literacy block. However, one of my colleagues also has her literacy block during that time, and she would like access to those computers as well. So we share, because we're a good team. We have a fantastic team where I work. So here's my reality. I have 30 learners, and on a good day, I have 7 computers. So how do we do this? I think the time has come that we admit that when we were in a classroom where all 30 children were doing the same thing simultaneously, that we've probably moved into a different age. And I think we need to be creative about our resources and our timetables and our scheduling and figure out a way to do it. I'm not saying that this is the right way, I'm just saying this is how I do it, how I make it work. So in my classroom, I do guided reading every day. Do guided reading every day? So as part of my guided reading block, I have things that my students are working on. So they have lots of other choices that they can be working on. They can be working on their reading, working on their writing. They can be responding to their reading. They can be doing guided reading with me, or they can have a tech option. So now all of a sudden I have 5 days a week where I have a tech option for students. So using those 6 or 7 computers every day, I have 6 or 7 children during my independent reading time on those computers for 20 to 30 minutes every single day. So I know that every student in my class is on a computer for at least one session every week. When I went to Reading for the Love of It in the spring, Debbie Diller inspired me to try literacy workstations, and that has revolutionized my literacy block. So I have my guided reading time and my independent working time. I know that my children are getting on the computers at least once a week. Later on in my literacy block, I have literacy workstations. Literacy workstations are collaborative work time with students. Now I have my students in partners. I still have 6 or 7 computers. That means that I have double that opportunity of getting my kids on the computers every day. During my literacy workstations, I have the opportunity to having 5 or 6 groups. That's 10 or 11 kids on the computer. The fewest times my kids should be on a computer is 2 to 3 times a week. And I only have access to 6 or 7 computers. It's possible. We need to be thinking about how you can change the way we approach teaching. I wish I could tell you Bill Gates was knocking on my door and handing me 30 computers for each of my kids, but he's not yet. If he happens to be watching with the cameras, I would love some sponsorship, but he's not. So I, like you, are in the trenches trying to figure out how I'm going to do this with the limited resources. So that's just one way to think about how you can bring the digital world into your class. Now, a computer is just a tool. It's like handing kids a pencil and saying, today you're going to use the pencil for 30 minutes without them having anything to do. So how do you make that time that they have with this tool something that is worthwhile and authentic and purposeful? And it's what they're doing when they're on those digital tools that makes the difference. I'm going to just tell you some stories about some real amazing educators who I work with and some of the ways that they have brought digital tools into their classrooms. We're going to take a closer look at the letter C. Everything I tell you starts with the letter C. So the first one is being connected to the world. And you know, as I look at this, I put this together a few months ago, but my heart goes out to Haiti again as we look at Hurricane Tomas bearing down on them. And I think about the world we live in is not an isolated place. We are connected. We are all connected to each other through the power of digital tools. In 2009, when the hurricane hit Haiti, I think we were all in our classrooms and we were all just a little shocked about what was going on. Well, some kids started asking questions. They wanted to understand, what was an earthquake? How does the Richter scale work? Why did it hit Haiti? Why did their city suffer so much devastation? These are questions I don't have the answers to. So how can I find out? So we got on the computers and we started researching. Initially, they had questions about science, the science behind earthquakes. How do they happen? But as we found out more and more about Haiti, the kids started to be connected with the people who were in Haiti. And they wanted to know not only how are those people doing, but how can I help? How can I be an active part of helping? And the kids discovered that it doesn't cost a lot for those mobile hospitals. They were about $100. The filters, did you know that you could get a water filter for $78 that would purify water? So the kids started to research what resources were available and how much did they cost. And we started fundraising with a purpose. They knew exactly what they wanted to buy, they knew exactly who they wanted to help, and they knew exactly what they needed to do. A few months later, we saw that Haiti was starting to open their schools again. We kept in touch. We weren't physically in touch with Haiti, but we were connected with them. So we found families who were traveling to other parts of the world. We know what the world looks like. We know the Dominican Republic is on the other side of Haiti. We had a lot of families traveling on March break. We sent school supplies with them. We collected pencils and erasers and stickers, little notebooks, anything we could scavenge, and they would take them down. At the airports, they were collecting things and sending them over to Haiti. We were connected with the world. The kids knew who these children were on the other side of the world. They understood what had happened to them and how they could help. This Pacific Gyre, has anyone ever heard of that? When you go home, Google it. Pacific Gyre is a place in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, the North Pacific Ocean. And what's happening is basically, because of the ocean currents, as they swirl away from the continents, they're creating this giant swirl, almost like a giant toilet bowl in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And plastic does not break down. Any pieces of plastic that have been put into the Pacific Ocean in the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years are starting to swirl and collect in the middle of this Pacific Gyre. It's a spot in the middle of the Pacific Ocean the size of Texas. They're finding that animals are starting to consume parts of plastic thinking that it's plankton. It doesn't break down any smaller. And the animals that are being found there have 6 parts of plastic out of 10 in their bodies. Okay, how are we connected to that? When we want our kids to go out and start thinking about community cleanups, when we want them to think about recycling their water bottles, when we want them to think about why we should be using recyclable containers, well, let's find out what happens to our world when we don't take care of it. We need to be connected to the world we live in. And the final story about connecting is last year in the Gulf oil disaster, the BP oil disaster. I was teaching in a grade 3-4 at the time. I know, they're little, but they knew enough about the world. They wanted to know what was happening. They'd seen it on the news. So we started researching what was happening in the Gulf. Why did this happen? What was the cause of it? What was going to be the effects, the long-term effects of this? How on earth could they stop it? We all had our own hypotheses about what they should be doing, and we were right. But you know what? We started talking about why do we need oil? And a lot of kids started wondering, why exactly do we need oil? Why were they digging in the ocean? So we actually had a debate. I had one group of students debating that oil is a necessary resource and that we need it to exist in our current society, and that it provides us with the energy that we need for all of the things that we do. Then I had another group looking at the terrible, catastrophic effect that it had on the environment. They found all their information. They were researching, finding out as much as they could about the uses of oil and the disasters. And I gotta tell you, one of my little girls, the first thing she asked me when I saw her in September this year was, "Mrs. Donohue, did you hear that they stopped the oil flow?" That was over the summer. She had been following it. She cared. She wanted to know what happened. So you can be connected to the world.